In the chaos of the moment, when you're quick to respond, you miss more than just words. You miss the flicker in someone's eyes, the hesitation in their voice, the sentence they almost said but didn't. You miss the contradiction between their words and their actions. And most importantly, you miss something you often overlook: your own automatic reactions. When you choose silence over impulse, everything changes. You begin to see, not just what's being said, but what's being shown. The subtle game behind a gesture, the emotional pattern beneath an apology, the echo of manipulation cleverly masked as concern. This is what Carl Jung called the beginning of individuation, the sacred process of becoming who you truly are. It's the moment you begin separating your awareness from the projections of others. It's when you stop performing the roles that were assigned to you and start embodying the self you were born to reclaim. Because when you speak impulsively, especially in moments of emotional intensity, you're often not speaking from your truth. You're speaking from programming, from childhood defense mechanisms, from trauma-informed logic, from roles you were trained to play, not who you really are, but silence. Silence disrupts that loop. It shifts you from performer to observer. And that shift, that's where freedom begins. True observation is liberation. To observe is to take your power back. It's to pull your energy out of emotional transactions that were never yours to carry. It's the bold act of stepping outside the moment to ask with clarity, what's really happening here? Because beneath every conversation, there's a deeper dynamic, a deeper truth, and most of it is hiding in plain sight, if you're quiet enough to see it. The moment you stop reacting, you begin to notice how people bend their stories to place blame on you, how a harmless question might be a disguised form of control, how an apology might be a subtle test of your emotional boundaries. In that space of stillness, you rise above the fog of emotional performance and pain. Not in arrogance, but in sovereignty. You no longer feel the need to correct every lie or challenge every distortion. You simply let truth reveal itself. Because in your stillness, people tell on themselves. They stretch their justifications. They talk too much. They scramble to explain. And while all of this unfolds, you, untangled and unwavering, just observe. But the silence doesn't just reveal others. It reflects you back to yourself. In that stillness, you'll notice your own nervous patterns, your urge to please, your fear of being misunderstood, your habit of over-explaining. And you'll realize something powerful. So many times, you've used your voice to defend boundaries you could have simply enforced with presence. That's the paradox of lucid silence. The less you say, the more clearly you are seen. First by yourself, then by the world. To choose observation over reactivity is to reclaim your inner tempo, your rhythm, your clarity, your power. Because you don't have to speak to be powerful. Sometimes, the most radical act is to stand in silence, not in weakness, but in unshakable awareness. To free yourself from emotional captivity is to return to the center of your own being. From that still, grounded place within, you realize something rare. You don't need to win the conversation. You only need to stop performing in it. You don't have to fix the narrative. You simply need to withdraw the energy that was keeping it alive. Lucid silence is a radical act. It's the decision to stop feeding the lie, to speak volumes without saying a word. Because a well-placed pause can hold more power than 1,000 rebuttals ever could. When you react from reflex, your truth becomes diluted by urgency. But when you observe before responding, your words, or your decision to stay silent, gain precision, purpose, and weight. This is the beginning of psychic economy, of emotional discipline, of subtle but unshakable power. Not power over others, but the rare power to stay rooted in yourself, never again pulled out of alignment by someone who hasn't earned the right to hold your attention. That's what clarity gives you. And when fully embodied, clarity is indistinguishable from strength. But let's be honest, speaking your truth isn't always empowering. Sometimes it's draining, especially when your truth is poured into ears that were never listening in the first place. We've been taught that sharing is always noble, that if we just explain ourselves clearly enough, we'll be understood, that if we speak from the heart, others will respond with care. But the truth is, not everyone is ready or willing to receive what you reveal. Giving your truth to the wrong person can leave you feeling more misunderstood, more frustrated, and more alone than you were before. Because every time you speak your truth, your needs, your boundaries, your healing, you're not just sharing words, you're offering pieces of yourself. And that comes at a cost: your energy, your clarity, your vulnerability. So here's the real question. Are you investing your voice where it matters, or spending it where it's wasted? Carl Jung warned us of this. He spoke of the danger of sharing your inner world with those who only see you through their own projections, through stories they've written in their minds about who you are, not based on who you actually are. When someone listens through the lens of assumption, even your clearest truth can't reach them. That's not communication. That's damage control. You don't owe anyone a play-by-play of your life. You don't need to defend your peace to someone who thrives in your confusion. You don't have to explain your boundaries to someone who's offended by your growth. You get to be selective with your truth. You're not withholding. You're protecting. You're not cold. You're clear. This is emotional maturity, knowing when your truth is being invited with love, and when it's being extracted through control. And when you become quiet enough, still enough, present enough, you start to notice how often you over-explain just to keep the peace, how quickly you soften your edges to be more palatable, how frequently you offer clarity just to avoid conflict. But there's power in restraint. There's strength in knowing that not every moment is meant for disclosure, not every listener is capable of hearing you, and not every conversation is safe. Your silence, when rooted in awareness, not avoidance, is not just a boundary, it's a breakthrough. Because to choose silence when you could react, defend, or explain is to reclaim the one thing no one can steal from you: your center. You keep bending your boundaries just to feel heard. You feel drained after opening up to people who never truly see you. So here's the shift that changes everything. Speak less where you're not respected. Speak deeply where you are. Let your silence become a filter. Let your presence carry what no longer needs to be explained. And trust this: those who are truly capable of receiving you will never need a performance to understand your truth. Because when you stop handing your voice to people who never earned it, you don't become cold. You become wise. And you begin to speak like someone who knows their words carry weight. Knowing your boundaries is one thing. Holding them is another. Understanding your patterns isn't the same as breaking them. Awareness is powerful, but without action, it becomes a delay tactic dressed up as self-work. You can study yourself forever and still avoid making different choices. You stay in your head, you analyze, you reflect, but nothing changes until your behavior does. Carl Jung once said that transformation begins when awareness meets responsibility. When insight stops being something you think about and starts becoming something you live. It's not enough to say, people-pleasing is rooted in fear. You have to feel that fear and still say no. It's not enough to say, my peace matters. You have to let the phone ring. You have to stop over-explaining yourself to people who aren't even trying to understand. Discipline is the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. And yes, it will feel uncomfortable, maybe even wrong at first, because your nervous system is still wired for the old script. But every time you pause, every time you choose presence over performance, silence over apology, you're not just changing your behavior, you're reclaiming your self-respect. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. Your truth doesn't need more explanation. It needs more embodiment. So ask yourself, are you still performing what's safe, or are you finally living what's real? Because reflection without action is just another form of avoidance. Clarity without change is just another cage. Start small. Hold the boundary. Let the silence speak. Let the phone ring. That's when healing stops being a concept and becomes a choice. And yes, being alone can feel scary, especially if you've spent your life tying your worth to your relationships, your roles, or how much space you're allowed to take up. We've been taught that solitude means something's wrong, that if you're not included, connected, or constantly surrounded, you must have failed somehow. But what if that's not true? What if solitude isn't punishment, but the beginning of something sacred? There comes a moment when you're just tired. Tired of performing. Tired of smiling when you want to cry. Tired of saying yes when your soul is screaming no. You've spent so long molding yourself for others, you've forgotten what it feels like to be you, the real you, when no one's watching. But that moment of fatigue, that moment of sacred isolation, it's not the end. It's the doorway to who you really are. This is where sacred isolation steps in. Not the kind of isolation where you build walls or cut people off, but a conscious, intentional space, a pause from the noise, so you can hear yourself again. At first, the silence may feel heavy, unfamiliar, even lonely, but stay with it, because beneath that discomfort is something rare, your real self. Carl Jung once said we all wear masks, what he called the persona. It's how we navigate the world. We fit in, we function. But if you wear the mask for too long, you begin to forget what's underneath. To find yourself again, you must take a step back from the crowd. Not forever, but just long enough to recognize which parts of you were shaped by fear, by habit, or by the need to be liked. Sacred isolation is that sacred pause. It's the moment you stop performing, stop being who everyone else expects you to be, and start remembering who you are when no one needs anything from you at all. You begin to enjoy your own company. You start choosing rest over obligation. You say no without guilt. You sit in silence and realize you're not lonely. You're finally at peace, and from that peace, something powerful begins. You start to rebuild your life, not around other people's expectations, but around your own truth. You stop needing constant validation. You stop chasing closeness that leaves you feeling empty. You start choosing what feels honest, even if it's quiet, even if it's small, because sacred isolation doesn't disconnect you. It makes you whole. Sometimes pulling away isn't rejection. It's remembrance. It's reclamation. It's coming home to yourself. And once you come home to yourself, you stop searching for yourself in others. You carry yourself with you wherever you go. Letting go can feel like grief, but sometimes it's not loss. It's release. Not a goodbye to something beautiful, but a quiet escape from something that was silently breaking you. When you begin to distance yourself from someone, your first instinct may be guilt. You wonder, am I being unfair? Too sensitive? Too cold? But take a deeper look. Ask yourself, are you truly grieving the person? Or are you finally detoxing from the chaos they brought into your life? Not every connection is nourishing. Some are draining, some are disorienting, some are addictive. You find yourself managing their moods, walking on eggshells, carrying emotional weight that was never yours to hold. And you leave those conversations feeling more confused than clear. It's easy to mistake that emotional chaos for depth, but intensity isn't the same as intimacy. Emotional turbulence is not emotional truth. Walking away from it doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. You may not even notice the weight until it's gone. But one day, after you've put some distance between you and the storm they always pulled you into, you'll feel it. Peace. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet kind, the kind that lives in your body, the kind that whispers, "This is who I am without the chaos." There comes a moment when you stop overthinking. You stop rehearsing conversations. You stop trying to fix what was never yours to carry. And that's when the truth finally lands. What you feared losing was actually what had been holding you back. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So many of us live trapped in emotional chaos, unaware that the pain we've normalized is just a pattern we've never questioned. But the moment you step away, the moment you give yourself space, you begin to see it clearly. It wasn't connection. It was a cycle, disguised as closeness. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you've stopped clinging to what hurts. It's not about building walls. It's about building boundaries, the kind that protect your energy, your peace, and your growth. Yes, at first it may feel like something precious is ending, but what's really ending is the version of you that believed staying in pain was the price of staying connected. What follows next is strength. When you stop needing people who confuse your nervous system, you begin to trust yourself again. Your mind quiets, your heart softens, your spirit lightens. Sometimes what feels like loss is actually clarity moving into the space where chaos once lived. Let it. Something shifts inside you when you stop pouring your energy into what depletes you. A quiet power rises, not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable. It shows up in how you walk, how you speak, how you carry yourself, without asking for permission. This is the rebirth of your true self, not the self you built to survive, not the one you performed to be accepted, but the self that's been patiently waiting underneath it all, whole, honest, and unshaken by the noise. You don't discover this self by adding more. You find it by subtracting, pulling your energy back from people, roles, and patterns that drain you, withdrawing from what no longer reflects your truth, letting dead things die. Rebirth begins the moment you stop settling, not just in relationships or careers, but in how you speak to yourself, in how you tolerate disrespect, in how often you excuse pain just because you've grown used to the sting. You begin to recognize how much of your life was shaped by fear disguised as loyalty, fear of being too much, not enough, misunderstood, left behind. But once you stop feeding that fear, something else begins to grow. A self that no longer chases, no longer performs, no longer explains. Carl Jung called this individuation, the unfolding of your most authentic being. And once it starts, there's no going back. You're no longer defined by the masks you wore. You're no longer confined by the roles you played. You are not rebuilding. You are returning to the self you were always meant to be. The journey back to your truest self isn't about becoming someone new. It's about removing everything you were never meant to be. Not the version shaped by expectations. Not the identity molded by noise, pressure, or approval. But the real you. The one that remains when all the pretending stops. This reborn self doesn't wait for validation to act. It doesn't shrink to fit into rooms too small for its truth. It knows that solitude isn't punishment. It's preparation. And boundaries? They're not walls. They're birth canals, guiding you into a new identity rooted in wholeness, not performance. Yes, there will be grief. Grief for the roles you played. Grief for the years you spent shrinking yourself to keep the peace. Grief for the person you had to pretend to be just to survive. But once you let go, something sacred rises. You stop coping and start creating. You stop begging and start attracting. You stop explaining and simply become. And as you rise into this new frequency, you'll notice something miraculous. the right people find you. Because you're no longer hiding your signal. You're no longer muting your truth. Let's be honest. Rebirth doesn't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like stillness, like silence, like finally saying, I don't want this anymore, and trusting deeply that something better will rise in its place. And it will. Because when you stop giving your energy to what drains you, you don't just reclaim your power. You redirect it into healing, into clarity, into building a life that finally fits the real you. This is who you were always meant to meet. Not a better version, just the honest one, the one who no longer performs, but lives. So if this message stirred something deep in you, if you're tired of shrinking, tired of explaining, tired of settling, let this be the beginning of your return. I send out a free weekly newsletter with more grounded, honest content, designed to bring you back to yourself. Subscribe below. If you're walking this path with me, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Drop the words "new me" in the comments if you're done settling. If you're ready to move, speak, and choose from your wholeness, not your history. And when you're ready to go deeper, watch the full playlist linked below. Share in the comments your story about choosing yourself. What changed when you finally stopped performing for people who kept taking? Your words might be the healing someone else needs to hear. And as always, protect your energy, honor your truth, live as the version of you that no longer waits to be chosen, because you've already chosen yourself.